So a while ago I made a progressive house lead layering and processing tutorial, and for that I used my track Runaway, which is my previous track. Now my latest track is With My Baby, which came out at the beginning of November. But for that we will be posting a full-length, in-depth masterclass, but that one will come later. And for today's video I decided to make a like a bassline layering and processing tutorial, and for that I will be again showing you my track Runaway, how I basically made the bassline in that track. So let's get into that FRP again. Yeah, so again today's video is about the bassline in my track Runaway. And first of all, before I go into like depth with everything, let me show you yeah, the bassline, how it solely sounds. Yeah, so that is what the bassline sounds like in this track, and as you might be able to tell, it's not actually like too aggressive. Like usually in progressive house you tend to have like quite aggressive sounding bass lines, but in this track I wanted to go for like a little softer sounding bass line, and yeah, because I felt like it was kind of working a bit better with the like emotion and stuff in this track. Yeah, but what like usually works best with your bass line is if you split it up into a sub bass and into your mid bass. So that's what I did in this track as well. So as you can see, I have two patterns for the bass line right here, and we got this pattern 3, which is basically my sub bass. So this one provides all the sub frequencies. And then we got this mid bass pattern, and these basically provide more mids and highs in order to just fatten up the bass line and in order to give it its special character and sound. And again, for this tutorial I will be using the span analyzer to show you like also like what it looks like frequency wise, because that, you know, always gives like a nice addition to basically, yeah, like what you hear. So now I've set it up here on the right, so we can always check like what the sound actually does like frequency wise, and down here we also have the correlation meter. So now let me play the sub bass only. So what you can see with the sub bass is that it's pretty much mono. So that's why the correlation meter is like going like straight to the right. That means it's mono. So the more it goes to the left, the more stereo information the sound has. And also, as you can tell, the sub bass basically is most present in like this area right here, down here, which is like below those 80 Hertz, you can pretty much say. And that's basically the area where your sub bass should sit. Like you can usually say like between 40 and 80 Hertz is like the best range, I would say. Like it can go a little higher maybe depending on your track and like the key and stuff. But with your sub bass I wouldn't go much higher than like 100, 120 Hertz maybe. And then what you can also see, like it has some like overtones or harmonics. And that's basically just to, yeah, make the sub bass a little fatter. So usually what I do is I actually just go for like a sine wave. But with a sine wave you basically like only actually have that like one frequency. But this one, like it does already have like those harmonics because it's like a saw wave, and this just makes it a little warmer overall. And yeah, then let's check out the mid basses, what they look like on the analyzer. So as you can see with the mid basses, they don't have any sub at all. So if you check again, there's nothing below 100 Hertz, you can say, really. And basically that allows me to mix my sub separately from like the top or the mid bass. And this way I can, for example, if I want to mix my kick drum with the sub, I can basically set the actual like sub bass levels correctly, and then if I feel like maybe in the mix with like the leads and the chords and stuff, the bass line is actually not that like audible to the listener, I can basically just drag up or like turn up the volume of my mid basses without actually giving more sub to the bass line, because again, like I have separate control now over the mids and the highs and my sub in the bass line. And as you can also see with the mid bass is that it's basically quite stereo-ish, so it does have a lot of stereo information. And this is also a trick to actually widen up your sound or your bass line, because obviously, like you might have already heard that your sub bass should always be mono. Like that's at least like the most common way. Like you can go experimental. Like Dyro did something like that. I think he put his sub in stereo, but usually you just want to keep your sub mono. That will be the easiest way and like the cleanest. But actually, if you have your mids separated, then you can actually widen those up and still get a wide sound without actually needing to widen up your sub bass. Now if we take again a look at the bass line together with the sub and the mid bass, what you can tell is that it doesn't have like a lot of high information actually, and this is also something you want to like pay attention to, because if you give like too much high frequencies or also mids to your bass line, then your leads or your chords might not have enough room in the drop. So that's always something you should pay attention to. Now if you take a look at the individual layers for the bass line, I basically just took that one layer for the sub bass, which is like this saw, like it's literally called saw bass in Spire. And yeah, then for the mid basses, I actually took 2 layers, and these are also from Spire. This one is called wide bass, and then this one is called simply Prog 3, simply Progressive 3, I don't know. And if you like take a look at like the first mid bass layer, it sounds like that. And again, like this one provides all the mids and highs, and it's also very wide actually. And then with the second mid bass layer, what I did with this one, I actually gated it up so that it like kind of plays those gated notes. And yeah, if you just listen to this one, so as you can see, this one is again actually like very mono-ish, and this one also has like some sort of resonating character to the sound, I would say. And this one really helped to make the bass line cut even better through the mix because of that like resonating frequencies which it provides. But with this one you need to be careful, because if you make it too loud, it will pop out too much out of like or in the mix. And that's already it with like the bassline layers actually. So in total I only have 3 layers. One for the sub bass, which is basically, you know, providing all those sub frequencies, and it's also mono. Then I have a mid bass layer, which is basically providing all those mids and highs, and this one is very wide in order to give it like that wide sound. And then I have a second mid bass layer, or like just a third bassline layer in general, which is again mono, and which just provides some more resonating frequencies in the lower mids, you can say. And that's really it with the bassline in this track. Now let me show you how I processed these layers. So I have the 2 mid bass layers routed to channel 3. And then on here I only have the low and the high cut. So basically with the low cut I make sure that we get rid of the lows, because again we have that in the sub bass. And then the stereo enhancer is actually muted. But then I used this ozone imager, and with this one basically you can widen your different bands differently from each other. So in here I set up 3 different bands. Like this first one is from 20 to 450 Hertz, and with this one I just made the mid bass layers a little more mono-ish. And then with the second one, which is basically covering the frequencies from 450 Hertz to 10k Hertz, I widen these up a lot, like 100% actually, to really get that wide sound. And then with the third band I just widen it up a little bit, not as much as with the other one. And yeah, this one helped to really get that wide sound with the mid basses without making the lower frequencies actually too wide. Because if you have a wide bassline and you like play it back on a mono system, it can happen that you lose too much information in the lower frequencies. But with this basically I made sure that I only widen up like the higher mids or like the mids and the highs, but not like the lower mids and yeah, like the bass frequencies too much. And then what I usually have on my channels is like a low pass filter for automation, like the build up, so that I can like introduce the bass line. And then we got the sidechain, which like probably actually the most important effect on your bass line. So this one makes sure that it doesn't clash with the kick drum, but that's it should be self-explanatory. And then my sub bass is going to channel 2, and on here there's really nothing too special. Like this EQ is actually turned off, so I didn't use this one. And then here I again only have that low pass filter for the automation, and then just the sidechain in order to like not have it clashing with the kick drum. And then just one more thing, like for the sidechain, it usually works best if you just take the inverted curve of your kick drum and apply that to your sidechain for the bass line or for the sub bass. So if you check out the kick drum in this track, you can see that it looks like that. So this is the kick drum, and if you like take a look at the curve of the kick drum, you can see that you basically have like a little more than half of the space between each kick drum for your sub bass, because the kick drum pretty much stops playing at this point right here, around this point. And if you kind of now apply this curve to your sub bass, but like invert it, so basically that you duck your sub bass in this area and then you just let it play in this area, you basically get a pretty clean sidechain result. So this is what I did in here. So in like the first half, it's basically being ducked, and then like in the second half, like a little more than in the second half, it's actually up, and that works pretty well. Yeah, that's it with like the bass line in this track. So that's everything that I did, and like everything that I can tell you and show you for like bass lines. So again, like don't make it too complicated. I just used 3 layers in this track, and I hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something new in this little tutorial. And if you did, make sure to show this to your producer friends so that they can benefit from this video as well. Make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!